Okay, can I have people take their seats, please? Oops. 1, 2, 3. We'll just wait till we have quorum. Oh, that's okay. Okay, I'll call this special meeting to order of Tuesday, November the 29th. And just so council is aware, typically we don't record or live stream special council meetings, but we are doing that today. Any late items to introduce? Okay, good. So approval of the agenda, please, council. Councillor Holmes and Van Elfen, all in favor? And getting right on to the integration of strategic priorities into the budget process. So CAO, if you would like to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and all of Council for your time today. We are engaging in our regular budget process to plan for the upcoming cycle. And as Council did receive yesterday, the quarterly updates, I think it sort of set the table a little bit for today's discussion in terms of things currently underway, and now we turn our mind to the future needs. And one of the things I will reiterate is that Mr. Svetlichny and I, our Financial Services Director, have not yet had the opportunity to sit down with each and every department head to do sort of the stress test of what their current thinking is on their budgets. So you're seeing the raw sort of request, but it should be anticipated that as we work through those meetings and ask certain questions and press on certain details, some of these numbers will change in the likelihood. Some of the numbers will decrease in terms of the budget forecast, but we wanted to get the process started. So these are the raw budgets that are prepared by the departments, and we'll hear today from departments in terms of their challenges and some of their successes in this cycle, and then looking forward what some of the budget requests are, and we can have some of that open discussion. So we're certainly looking forward to Council's deliberation and direction as we work through the budget process.
Thank you. We all know it's Mr. Svetlichny's favorite time of year. And you're the next on the speakers list, so please go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, this is definitely Christmas for me and my staff. It's a fun process that we get to go through every year, but you know, since I've been here, I think we've tightened up some timelines, we've moved things along, and I think Council is, from what I've heard, is fairly happy with the process that we go through here, so that is encouraging as the Finance Director to hear that. Today's presentation, and just to kind of dovetail off what Graham had mentioned, is kind of day one in the primarily giving Council a good update as to, excuse me, as to what happened in 2020, 21, I guess. some of the challenges that we faced, our accomplishments, and looking ahead at 22, what we consider some of our key areas of deliberation that we may need to look at. So with that said, Kendra, if we can move that along. There we go. One more, please. So as most of council is aware, the IT reporting structure was changed this past summer, with the department now reporting to myself and not corporate services. So hence why you now see two columns as opposed to just the one as historically you have. In looking at some of the accomplishments in the finance department for 2021, the first item to note is our annual budgeting process. The council approved the 2021 to 2024 5-year financial plan by the end of February this year. This matched the 2020 timeline and is approximately 2 months quicker than it was historically. So our goal again this year for 2022 is to have this plan adopted by the end of February 2022. And based on the timeline that council approved a few weeks back, we're right on course. How come we moved forward? There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Another accomplishment this year in finance was from a staffing perspective. We hired a meter tech position, which was approved by council during the 2020 budget process. However, as we were getting ready to post that position in the spring of 2020, COVID hit and the hiring was postponed until 2021. The position has now been filled earlier this year, and Andrew, I'm not sure if council has had the pleasure of meeting him yet. He's doing a great job getting a good handle on our processes and getting out there working on that backlog of water meters that we have. So that was definitely an accomplishment from our perspective. And the third accomplishment that I'd like to highlight today is just the COVID adaptation. So like all businesses, our staff has also had to adapt with the ebbs and flows of the pandemic, from transitioning back and forth between working from home and not, dealing with what seemed like a weekly public health order, changes to trying to communicate with the public and letting them know there are myriads of alternatives to pay their bills outside of actually physically coming into the office. Our staff have done an exceptional job in ensuring things have run smoothly, that bills continue to be generated and paid, and that those residents that decided to physically grace us with their presence were taken care of in a professional and courteous manner. So although my staff are not here in the room today, I do want to give a huge shout out to them. They did an amazing job. On the IT side of things, this was touched on briefly, I think yesterday, but IT, there was an IT and a GIS needs assessment that were completed in 2021. And these, now that they're done, these projects that are going to be forthcoming in the 2022 to 2024 budget plan have been identified and will be brought forward to council over our budget process. Open data site went live in the summer of 2021. Residents can now look at our GIS data and through the open data site and can print maps and all sorts of things like that. So that's definitely an accomplishment on our IT side. We've performed some network upgrades where every municipal building now has at least a 1 gig internet service. Municipal Hall has a 2 or a 2.5 gig, but every other building has one. So the internet security and the dropping of Zoom feeds hopefully is now in the past. The council chamber and audio-visual upgrade, as council can see, Karen in the IT department did a great job in updating the IT, the speakers, the cameras. So that's now a completed project as well. And just recently, as of Friday, or as of Monday, yesterday, we've transitioned our phone system away from having it sitting on SD67 servers to now we've gone to a web-based phone system, and based on the conversations that I've had with our department and other members of the SMT team and our employees, the transition went very smoothly, and so that's another positive accomplishment. Now to the challenges. I've only picked two because I was told I didn't have a lot of time. But the first one, public and program changes. So 2021 saw yet another change implemented by the provincial government, wherein they took over full administration of the homeowner grant program. Now, historically, residents would fill in their HOG paperwork at Municipal Hall. However, with the changes the province made, residents had to now do it either online or through a phone-based system. We were aware of this as a district early on and started getting the message out very early. We used our newsletter, Facebook posts, mail out, inserts, carrier pigeon, you name it, we did it. As well as we also changed our property tax notices. Unfortunately, as often happens when procedural changes are made, it was our front-end staff that took the lion's share of criticism and verbal abuse relating to this, especially from those homeowners that did not read the information leaflets and were actually charged a penalty. So it was a challenging couple of weeks after property tax time finished, but our staff dealt with things, again, in a very professional and courteous manner. The second item to note is Inter-Departmental Communications. So over the past few years, the district has seen staff turnover in various positions. Now, as those positions are filled and there becomes a knowledge gap with new staff members coming in, especially when it comes to processes. In addition, some departments have made changes to the way they conduct business, all with the intention of being a more positive experience for the customer. So with all these changes, there have become breaks in the chain of information flow and documents that the finance department used to receive regularly, which are no longer available to us. So this has led to more time spent chasing after supporting documents and ensuring our records are complete for when the auditors arrive and provide our little examination. So organizationally, we do need to ensure that all of our employees that are within any given process have a proper understanding of the importance of documentation, as well as the flow of information. And organizationally, as a senior management team, we have discussed this, and we all agree that this is something we will endeavor to tighten up. On the IT side of things, again, communication. IT is an area where things, when they go wrong, they can go wrong very quickly, and they can affect multiple departments at a time. So communication is vital in order to ensure they're aware of proposed changes as they're brought forward. Throughout the course of the year, we have been working on communication, and with my last meeting with the IT department, we feel that the communication flow is much better. So it's a challenge, but also a positive there as well. From a lack of policies perspective, we do lack policies in the IT department. It's definitely something that we're going to be looking at as we move forward into 2022. Policies from email signatures to cybersecurity to cell phone usage. So those are all policies that we're definitely going to be looking at as we move forward to ensure some consistency throughout the organization. And the final challenge, which was a big one, in 2021, our IT department consisted of 4 FTEs that were budgeted for. Now, unfortunately, due to a medical occurrence, we only had 3 employees physically available. So that impacted IT's availability to deal with issues as they arose, which at times required snap decisions as there were more issues than staff to deal with. So we do have a plan moving forward into 2022 where this is going to be taken care of. From a priorities perspective, we touched on the asset retirement obligations in last year's presentation. This is a requirement that the Public Sector Accounting Board is requiring that all municipalities follow, where we look at all of our assets and determine if there's a retirement obligation liability or not. We're 90% of the way through an RFP we're just finalizing the scope on that, and this is going to be a lot of Renee's time in 2022 working on this project. We're also looking at rolling out a time capture system organizationally, where again, about 85% of the way there. Our financial software people are, like I say, about 85% through in creating the system, and we're hoping to roll that out in early January or February. And again, as mentioned in the challenges, but also Inter-Departmental Communications has also been highlighted as a priority moving into 2022. On the IT side of things, we are looking at upgrading some servers, not only from a network stability perspective, but also from a speed perspective. Our two biggest users of networks are our GIS system and our financial accounting system, which are both on the same server right now. So we do plan on splitting the two of them off. Cybersecurity, which I think Council has heard a few times in other organizations, some close by, that there's definitely a risk of cyber attacks, and it's definitely something that we will be looking at quite closely going into 2022. Policy implementation and management, that's also going to be a key on ours, and just our allocation of staffing resources, having that fourth individual to help out to get things moving and fixed in these departments. So from a resources perspective, we have, between the two departments, we have 11 FTEs, 7 in finance and 4 in IT. And we do not have any staffing requests being brought forward this year. And from a really high budget overlook perspective, when we look at the finance budget as its own individual segment, there's about a $34,000 increase that's being proposed at this time. Contractual wages are about $18,000 of that, and $15,000 to that asset retirement obligation standard. And then there's a couple of minor increases. And on the IT side, about a $28,700 increase, with wages being about $5,000. And the big one coming out of the GIS assessments need is $22,500 to have orthophotos done in 2022. And I think that's it for me.
Councillor Barkwell.
Didn't we manage to piggyback with another, well, I don't know, was it the, another organization, I'll say, for orthophotos recently, and save a lot of money on that?
Through the mayor, yes. My understanding is that was done in about 2 or 3 years ago, and we piggybacked with, I believe it was BC Assessment, where they were doing their flyovers. We've had conversations with BC Assessment. They're not planning on doing any flyovers for at least another 4 years. We've had some conversations with the RDOS and Penticton to see when they're doing theirs. At this time, they're not planning on doing those. So at this point, the budget just entails us, but we are still looking at hopefully partnering with someone else to lower our costs. But at this point, we haven't been able to find a suitor yet.
And how often do we typically do that?
Every 2 to 3 years, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions for finance? Councillor Barkwell.
The asset retirement obligations, was that for things like the landfill closure, or is there more to it than that asset and what?
Through the mayor, yes. The landfill definitely does fall within the confines of this standard. However, it's much more broad. We actually have to look at all of our assets. So this building, for instance, there's a very good chance there might be asbestos in this building. So what we're required to do is determine if there is asbestos in it, and if there is, we have to calculate a liability as to what it will cost us to safely remove that in the future when this no longer is as an active building. So this looks at buildings, it looks at some of our pipes in the ground, or transformers, or anything that has a potential liability to the district. We need to look at and determine whether or not it is a viable liability or not, and then prepare a bunch of calculations. So it's I'm not sure if council recalls tangible capital assets when they came in as a standard, probably in 2009, I think it was. That project times probably 3 from a work perspective.
Is there any chance that part of that work is already part of the asset management work that's been done?
Great question, Madam Mayor. Yes, some of it is done. Our asset inventory, for the most part, through our asset management work is quite good. There's a couple sections that need to be looked at again and highlighted, but that is a big component of this work is actually identifying all our assets, and we're pretty far along on that work.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. And this obligation, it's a provincial requirement?
Through the mayor, it's a Canadian standard. So it's the Canadian CPAs of Canada. One of the dovetails off is the PSAB, Professional Standard Accounting Board, which governs all municipalities in Canada. So this is their standard that they're bringing forward. So every municipality in Canada needs to adhere to this. If we don't, when it comes time to our audit, and we haven't done the work, I would assume that our auditors would qualify our financial statements, because they won't be in line with the standards.
Okay, any other questions on the finance piece? All right. Thank you, Dave. Kendra for corporate services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a quick overview of the Corporate Services Department for 2021 and looking forward to 2022. Some of our 2021 accomplishments include maintaining public accessibility to council decision-making throughout COVID-19, mainly through the audio-visual upgrades to council chambers to allow the public to electronically participate. As of September 29th, the district has transitioned back into in-person council meetings with mayor and council and staff, as well as the public, while continually allowing for electronic participation during meetings. The district has increased our social media and media presence throughout the year. Corporate Services has created new tracking processes and streamlined efficiencies to better manage the departmental workload and to better understand pressure points and resource allocation. To date, we have processed, that says 30, but we have now processed 31 FOI requests. That's on the same level at this time last year for 2020. We have 15 procurements that have been managed and completed to date, with an additional 8 procurements in the process. To break this down, the completed procurements include 8 RFPs, 6 RFQs, and 1 invitation to tender. And the procurement department, or the procurement aspect of it, has created new invitational RFX, but could be RFP, RFQ documents or templates and processes to better streamline smaller procurements. Some of our 2021 challenges this year include challenges with COVID-19 that have been ongoing, and we've had to find suitable ways to allow public access to council meetings, and district services, as well as guide staff in navigating provincial health orders in relation to council, committee meetings, public engagement, etc. We've had to manage competing demands for resources for time and support, and some pressure points there include we've had increased FOI requests, and managing the district's risk management program, including managing new and ongoing claims, putting efforts into areas to mitigate claim potential, and managing and maintaining required third-party insurance. Other challenges include reduced resource capacity, largely due to staff turnover for administrative support to manage the department's workload. And finally, it's been challenging to maintain a standard level of service with reduced capacity to be able to serve residents, council, and other departments. Some of our 2022 priorities include continuing to improve our customer service by corporate services capacity building and creating and managing service level expectations, documentation, and metrics. Some of our priorities include large governance tasks, including the 2022 general local election, beginning to plan and develop a records and information management program, as well as a legal risk management framework, and implementing legislative changes such as those introduced and proposed by Bill 26. And finally, we will continue to look for ways to improve the district's performance by implementing cross-training and collaboration across departments. So our corporate services resources, we have no FTE requests this year. We currently operate with 3.5 or 3.4 FTEs, and the changes in 2021 include IT services going to the finance department and the sustainability and alternative energy coordinator transferring to the works and infrastructure department. So the 2022 budget for myself includes an approximately $30,000 for the 2022 general local election. And there's been overall budget increases compared to 2021 in the following budget. So the legislative budget has increased approximately $26,000. The administration budget has increased approximately $12,800. And the municipal hall budget has had no significant increase. And the increases and changes to the budgets include the anticipated ability to attend conferences and professional development opportunities, associated travel costs, and as well as CPI increases for 2022.
Corporate services questions? Councillor Holmes?
The budget increase for conferences and professional development opportunities, is that just for corporate services or is that across the organization?
So it'd be for corporate services and the administration, so Graham himself, and it also includes for councils, travel, and conferences as well.
Okay, and this is follow-up, if I may, for the CAO, I suppose, but do we have, how do we take into account professional development across the organization? Is it department by department? Is it something we look at as or organization-wide, or I guess how is that viewed? Thanks.
Through the mayor, Councillor Holmes, I'd probably turn to our director of financial services on that one, given the history of how we've done the budgeting in the past.
Thank you, through the mayor. Yes, it's currently it's looked at department by department. There have been some conversations within the senior management team. I'm going back probably 5-6 months now, where we are putting together a more focused document that shows all of the different requirements that each employee needs in order to do their jobs. So one of the main reasons for that is just to ensure that people always have the proper tickets that they need, and nothing kind of falls through the cracks. But when it comes to budgeting for those dollars and those courses, those are budgeted for within the department that that employee works.
And just in terms of a bit of a go-forward plan layering on there, one of the directions I'm taking the organization is the development of performance management plans for all staff. We'll probably roll out on the senior management and exempt in the upcoming cycle, but the performance management plan identifies sort of the specific tasks of each employee according to their job, how those connect to council and other priorities, including operational priorities. And then there will be a section there that talks about a learning plan. And the learning plan would include not only things that touch on, basic certifications that need to be renewed, et cetera, but also the goals of the individual staff person, how those align with priorities and work that they're expected to deliver. So it would be something that we do want to evolve down to the individual level within the overarching budget piece that Dave's talking about, but that'll be an item for 2022.
Okay. Your turn, Marnie.
All right. Hi. Kendra, you click for me? Yeah, okay. So Human Resources, which is in the Administration Department. So 2021 accomplishments. I think recruitment is probably the theme of the year. We had about approximately one recruitment per week, and we're at 37 job postings as of the end of September. We are working to maintain IBW and QP labor relations, and we do work hard to make sure that we don't have grievances and mediations and arbitrations and try to sort through issues. So we work with the two groups that we have, QP and IBW, with that. And as far as support to all the departments, HR provides support to all the departments to have consistent progressive discipline and documentation throughout the throughout the district as required. We continue, since I started 2.5 years ago, to try to update all of our policies and practices and get those foundational documents in place. So things like the code of ethics as far as policies and police information checks for staff when they start, if they're dealing with vulnerable sector, going into people's houses, putting in those types of processes now. And we did have a few new classifications and adjustments to our collective agreement in the last year. So those are some of the 2021 accomplishments. And then we move to challenges. So COVID continues. We do have our challenges with COVID and continuing to react to the public health orders as they change, and they do change often. I'm sure everybody's aware. So we react to the public health orders. We continue to update our policies, put the plans in place, and we've done well. We to date have had no workplace transmissions, and I'm going to knock on wood because I'm hoping I'm not going to change that by saying it out loud, but we haven't had any workplace transmissions. And we're continuing to update our protocols as needed. We did have some time-consuming IBW issues in 2021 that were some challenges for the department that took some time. Recruitment, as I said, besides the fact that we have the sheer increased number, the recruitment pool is getting less and less, and everybody's going through a more difficult time trying to recruit people and find people for positions. So it's a hard to recruit field out there that we're trying to pull people in from. So we have increased some of our hiring practices to do small things like sell ourselves as the district when we're out there trying to recruit people and look for reasons that people would like to come and work at the district of Summerland. So one example I can probably give council just for fun is on one of our last recruitments, Mr. Mitchell sitting next to me and I at the end were trying to figure out how to showcase the Summerland, the district of Summerland, our little town, the best. So we took her for a walk up Giant's Head from the top parking lot to the top, just as a part of the recruitment process. So trying to do small things like that, because it is a challenging recruitment field out there. And just the sheer amount of recruitment is never ending at this point. So 2022 priorities, we're still looking to provide departments timely support, address any HR related issues, and in parallel, we're still looking to put those core HR policies in place with the district, and we'll be looking at some more of those this year. And a big part of next year for the human resources area will be doing the research and collecting the information to begin the process to get ready for collective bargaining, because both the IBW and the QP collective agreement expire at the end of December, and we'll likely be looking at going into bargaining somewhere in the fall next year. As far as resources, historical tally there. we have 1.6 resources which were approved in 2020, but we did not hire that 0.6 in 2020 due to COVID. We ended up not filling that until 2021. So at 2021, we became 1.6, and there is a staff request in this year for a 0.4 to augment that position, and that's to help deal with the administrative services in the HR department and the increased complexity within the HR field that we're dealing with. Outside of that, in that budget, there are no other substantial increases or new requests for any budget items in 2022. And I think that's it.
Any questions? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. So, Marty, I've heard that headhunters have become more and more aggressive in local government than they've ever been before, and that as they get paid per placement or whatever, it's in their interest to ensure that there's high turnover within local government. And I'm just wondering if that's something you've observed or not.
Yeah, I mean, personally, just working with the people that I work with here, I know emails come in on a regular basis to our own staff of people just throwing it out there, headhunters saying we're looking for people. And I think everyone's experiencing that all around in some of those. But it is, some of the municipalities, even our neighboring municipalities, have gone out to and haven't used headhunters in years. And in the last year and a half, they've gone out and used headhunters because they just have been completely unable to fulfill some of the positions that they have. I'm a huge proponent in trying to keep as much recruitment as we can in-house, because you're already paying me and you're already paying another person. And standard recruitment costs, like, they don't start. I mean, if we were to go with a headhunter, 25% would be a minimum that we'd be looking at. So on the annual salary. So if you had $100,000 annual salary, it would be $25,000 a recruitment, and then you pay for the ads and everything on top of it. So it's very expensive, and I would hesitate to say we'd even get it for that amount. I think it would be more like 30, 35, even 40% if we were just doing one-offs. So, but it's a really, really tough field out there right now.
Councillor Van Elfen, you had your hand up, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're looking at QP and IBEW contract negotiations in the middle of an election this fall?
Yep.
Lovely.
The way that the collective bargaining actually works is either party can serve each other 90 days prior to the expiry of the contract. And if they serve each other, then you have an allotted amount of time. And I can't remember if it's 10 or 14 days, but you have that amount of time that you have to be at the table. So yes, it will be an election, but truthfully, we'll be coming to council and looking for direction and determinations on all types of information before we go into collective bargaining, including the timing of when we start.
Graham?
Yeah, just we could go into close too if we need to for more detail on some strategic thinking in that regard.
Do we need to, council? Great. Oh, do we need to?
We could do it at the end, Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
of the day?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you'd like to do that? Okay.
I'd like to hear the details.
Okay.
Thank you.
you. Any other questions for Marnie? That's okay, Marnie. Just wanted to check. Okay, thank you. Community Services and Recreation is next. Lori?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. Looking at 2021 accomplishments for community services, a big part of our work over the last year is implementation of COVID-19 protocols and changing PHO orders and restrictions. So we were adapting week to week on managing that piece of our operations. The Summerland Community Recreation and Health Center project has been proceeding throughout the year. We are working on 2 feasibility studies, one for the Health Center project and one for the Recreation project. That's been a big project that we're hoping to wrap up those feasibility studies in early 2022. As I mentioned yesterday, we've implemented and installed the outdoor fitness equipment at Memorial Park at the end of June. We spent some time working with a landscape architect to design dog parks at the Dale Meadows Sports Complex, and the end result was a temporary dog park at that site, which is being piloted over the next year. The George Riga Arts and Cultural Center, we've completed the renovations. We negotiated a lease agreement with the Summerland Community Arts Council, and we've done the building naming of that site. We've spent some time going through all the fees and charges for Parks and Recreation and ended up with a new fee schedule, which was long overdue, and that will be implemented in January of 2022. We completed the South Okanagan-Similkameen childcare study, and we are continuing to work as a region on childcare and looking at ways to implement the recommendations that are coming from that study as a region. And we've done some initial work on the master planning for Memorial Park as part of the downtown plan. As far as challenges, as I noted, COVID-19 has been a big challenge for us, and we've been working through that throughout the year. Aging infrastructure continues to be a challenge for us as our buildings are getting older and things are failing, and we're continuing to repair. Integrating community development, so that's new for our area for 2021. So we are looking at ways of integrating arts and culture into the work that we do, and facilitation of events through the community and supporting community groups, which will obviously take a larger role next year when events return. A big challenge, as council is well aware, is finding suitable dog park locations for a permanent long-term off-leash dog park, and continues to be a challenge, and we're continuing to work on that. We've seen an increase in vandalism over the last year. We're seeing it in our parks. We're seeing it at the bandshell at Memorial Park. We're seeing it in the skate park with lots of graffiti. And we're seeing it at the aquatic center. We've had several break-ins in the middle of the night, which has caused damage and costs for repairs. And I think just based on the highlighting list of the accomplishments, the number of projects that we've been working on throughout this last year has definitely kept us all very busy. As far as 2022 priorities, we anticipate that we'll be continuing to adapt and implement the COVID-19 protocols. The pandemic is still here, and we're still going to be required to roll out all the restrictions and the provincial directions that we receive. We'll be working on the next phases of the Recreation and Health Center project. We'll be finalizing the waterfront concept plan. We'll be finalizing the arena condition assessment. We'll be finalizing the downtown and Memorial Park master plan. We're targeting the installation of Memorial Park Playground in June of next year. We'll be working on the master plan for the Summerland Rodeo grounds. We hope to be implementing the Giants Head Mountain Trails project phases 3 and 4, and hope to find out this month, we're hoping, of confirmation if we are successful with the grant. We'll be looking to construct new tennis courts. We'll be looking to optimize the new Arts and Cultural Center. Now that it's open, we'd like to see it fully active and busy with programs and events. We're looking to optimize Center Stage Theater, and I just talked about that a little bit yesterday, and looking at ways to fully optimize that space. And for the arena, we will have, we're required to do some design work around the replacement of the chillers. They are at end of life, so we'll have a large expense in 2023, anticipating about $500,000 to replace the chillers, but this coming year in 2022 will be the design work around that, as well as the design work for implementing fire suppression in the building. As far as staffing, we have 36 staff, 2 exempt, 9 full-time, 11 part-time, and about 14 casual or relief staff. In 2021, there was a reduction of the community development coordinator, which has not been added. So we are looking at the same staffing level for 2022. Highlights for the 2022 budget. We are anticipating that there will be continued impacts on our revenues. We're seeing quite a large decrease in activity in our fitness room. So we anticipate until the pandemic is over, that people, the comfort level of people coming to our fitness room will slowly increase. But as far as the budget projections, we did do some reductions in some of the areas where we are anticipating a reduction in revenues, and we would be looking at those COVID relief funds to support that. We also have looked at the changes in the fees and charges schedule and implemented those changes for those increases. We're looking to update our operational hours to increase. So we'd be looking on Monday to Friday operations from 6:30 a.m. till 9 p.m. and Saturday and Sundays from 9 a.m. till 6:30 p.m. We're expecting a full return of outdoor sports and events. So knocking on wood, we'll see that for 2022, but we're planning for that. We are looking to reintroduce the $10,000 in our operating budget for fitness room equipment and replacement. That was cut for the last 2 years because of COVID and as a cost savings, but we're looking to put that back into the budget for 2022. And we're also, as I mentioned, the vandalism and the break-ins that we've had at the Aquatic Center, we are looking at the costing of potentially adding outdoor security cameras. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Have you had a hard time hiring lifeguards?
We're finding we have a turnover of lifeguards, and so we're a constant recruitment process, as Marty can attest to. But we've been okay so far in replacement of lifeguards. I know it's a challenge throughout our region, but we just hired 2 additional guards this last month, so we're trying to stay on top of it.
I just ask because I see you're going to extend hours. I just want to make sure that we're not going to push the people who are already. Every time I go to the pool, I see the same people. So I just want to make sure we're not going to make everybody work a lot more than they have been, because we need them to stay there long term, I think.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, that it is a different work environment. So we are staffing up to what we've always had. So when we had our full-time hours in 2019, we have the same staffing complement now. So we're considered at full capacity for hiring. But it's challenging because some staff are looking to work less and some want to work more, and that balance is a tough one. So we'll have to see with time, and if we find that we can't meet the needs through our new operating hours, we'll do another posting and look to hire some more. That's why we have so many casual staff, is to backfill.
I just have a question. I think it's probably for our Director of Finance. Dave, we've heard from 4 departments so far, including yours, and all 4 departments have spoken about the resource challenges, I guess human resource challenges related to COVID, but that also translates into financial resources. I'm wondering if there is, if the time and the related finances for resources that have been used to make sure that we're staying on top of the public health orders can be money that comes from the COVID Restart Fund.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that is definitely something that we are looking at. We have a specific, we call it an SRN. It's a job code where when we have employees that are working on anything specifically related to COVID, they use that job code, and what we do then is we reconcile that at the end of the year, and that's what we use. One of the things that we use when reconciling the COVID funds. So we are absolutely actively looking at staffing resources and where they're being allocated and how they're being spent, and trying to ensure that we're maximizing those COVID dollars.
And Madam Mayor, I'll just add that with the vaccine card checks, that's an added impact for us in some of the activities we do through community services. And so we now have 5 cashiers that we have on a relief basis that are coming in, and we'll be charging those extra services for that back to the COVID fund.
Good, thank you. I'm glad to hear there's the code in place. Not surprised, but glad to hear that that has already been tracked. Councillor Holmes.
Yes, and further to that, where you're talking about integrating community development, I'm really, pleased to hear that that's something you like to address. But I think that's kind of COVID related too. When you think, there's going to be this incredible pent up demand for people who want to get out and do things, and it's like coming out of a giant cabin fever, I think, and for in a way that's it's a great opportunity for events like Action Fest or whatever to really set themselves up for the future and reach new audiences and everything like that. But at the same time, a lot of these community groups have really, COVID has really impacted their capacity to deliver those kind of events. And, a lot of them have just kind of basically gone into hiatus, most organizations. And so, do you see that as a role for, when you're talking about integrating community development, that where we can help them, and if so, how? Is that something? I guess my question is, what is your thinking in terms of that integrating community development approach?
Well, we are anticipating, like you say, everyone to come out of the woodwork and put on events for next year. And so we've just been looking at strategies on how we can support that through our department, through booking permits, and hopefully making things easy for people to coordinate and implement their events in our community. We haven't added any new resources around that. We're trying to absorb that with our existing staff. And I don't know, David might be able to answer if there's any opportunities around the COVID funding that could be related to supporting these events after being not happening over the last few years, and having some startup or some support around rejuvenating them. I don't know if that would be applicable or not.
That's a tough question. It's one that I would want to take back to the province. I wouldn't want to give council the wrong answer. So I will add it to my list of questions to ask, and I'll bring it back during our general budget discussions.
Graham, this is for you. The other day when we were talking to Minister Osborne about the impact of COVID on the tourism sector here, I realized that some of these events are, well, I shouldn't say that. There are a lot of people that come from outside of Summerland to these events. I'm not sure if it's considered part of the tourism economy, but maybe that is another possibility for that approach, is to look at using some of the restart dollars.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's a good comment. The province has put a significant focus on rebuilding the tourism sector, what's often referred to as the visitor economy. And one of the things is there's a big focus on domestic and regional tourism and rebuilding that first, which is actually the largest part of the tourism base in British Columbia. And the international standard for assessing what is tourism is any trip that's one direction, one way, 40 kilometers or greater. So that really opens a lot of bandwidth, sort of regional interest and events. And, we'd certainly have a catchment area within above that 40 kilometers. So I think the organizations here and some of the things we're doing may be quite eligible for that. I know the Chamber is looking quite closely through their business recovery advisor on what opportunities there are to access those provincial programs. But yeah, good comment.
Any other questions for Lori? Okay, thank you, Lori. Development Services. Brad, I don't need to spell your last name, right?
No, thank you. On behalf of the Development Services Department, just the next slide here, I'll get into the 2021 accomplishments. Starting with our stats, although Council has seen these before in our monthly updates to Council, this has been updated actually for October. And we will be presenting at our next meeting on the October stats as well. But the chart here shows how busy our Development Services Department has been with regards to construction activity. So in terms of accomplishments, we've been keeping pace with our regular planning applications we normally get year over year. You can see the different application types we've had year to date in that graph above. Variance is a little bit lower and subdivisions a bit higher. And so we're still pretty busy on the planning and subdivision and development engineering side of our department, especially with regards to a lot of new subdivisions being brought online and the engineering requirements related to that. And then the chart below shows the value of construction activity that's occurred year to date for 2021. So that just goes to show that, in comparison to those are full year amounts before in 2021 for the end of the year. And we're at already well over our record amount that we experienced in 2019 as our previous record high. So definitely another high growth year in terms of construction activity, and our building officials are busy. So that's definitely an accomplishment, I'd say, of our team here in Development Services and managing all that growth. In terms of projects and some other specific items and what we accomplished in 2021, we got the agritourism accommodation update, regulatory update to allow that within our zoning bylaw, which was a request from the Chamber of Commerce. That was completed in July. We were successful in getting an award, a grant award from the UBCM Development Approvals grant process for the total amount of $370,000, which is fantastic to go towards a software solution to our development services and also other processes that touch on the development services area, especially integrations with other department areas. Which is going to be huge for us, I think, in the future. That was a good accomplishment, getting that grant funding in place. We've initiated the Eco Village project in July under Council's direction. That project's moving full steam ahead. Same with the downtown plan, short-term rentals. We've got a number of strategic projects identified by Council now running full steam ahead and are hoping to be completed in the near term in 2022. Just a couple others too that aren't even listed here. The housing needs assessment as well. We completed that in the spring in collaboration with the RDOS. That was another great document that we can use for our planning purposes for our housing needs. And then as well, we've kickstarted and we were successful with additional grant funding for the Okanagan Food and Innovation Hub as well in 2021. So that was another accomplishment. Just in general, with regards to our bylaw enforcement program, I do want to make a plug here to our new staff, especially Dan Maya, being hired on early in the year in 2021. The impact of him being brought in has been huge in changing our bylaw enforcement approach and program. And I think the community has been receptive to that change. Although that actually does lend into my next slide on some of the challenges we have with the number of complaints that are now being submitted to our department area. And then some of the development process and bylaw improvements we've completed as well in 2021. A number of new bylaws that were, or updates to bylaws that were required. The Good Neighbor bylaw was adopted by council in the spring. Fees and charges, driveway access amendments, just yesterday, the business licensing fees. And as well, we've initiated the building bylaw review project with step code implementation tied to that. In February of last year as well, another accomplishment that was key for our development process focus of our department was establishing targeted timeframes for all of our development processes. And we engaged with the Development Process Improvement Committee on that. And I'm happy to report that we've been able to meet those timeframes for all of our the application processes since we set those timeframes. So happy with the team and the work that they're doing to meet those timelines. Next slide. So challenges, I did already mention the growth in enforcement complaints, and I think council's already seen this graph, but I wanted to share it just again to illustrate the impact of 2021 and what we're experiencing in the bylaw enforcement side of things. So you can just looking at traffic as an example, these stats show the number of complaints that we received. The orange group bars are 2020 full year complaints we received versus year to date to the end of September in blue of 2021. So definitely we're seeing a growth in the number of complaints being submitted to our office. That's corresponding to our bylaw officer as well as the part-time officer being fairly busy in the field responding to complaint requests. Some of these are lower in 2021, like snow removal as an example, because we just haven't gotten to November and December of this year, which we can expect that to increase as we get to the end of 2021. So definitely we are seeing a lot of growth in enforcement complaints, I think because perhaps of the more proactive approach we are taking to bylaw enforcement, resulting in more complaints being generated. Another challenge that I've identified since taking over the department area about a year ago is a lot of manual processes that we have internally, and that being an administrative issue for us to manage different processes through to completion. We hope to rectify that with the new software and perhaps create some efficiencies as we move forward with that implementation process of that software. And but it has been something identified that as a challenge in 2021. We still have some bylaws that need to be updated, and we're targeting for next year. Traffic bylaw being one that needs to be looked at internally with our different departments that utilize that traffic bylaw, such as our works department, but also our bylaw enforcement team. And then as well, we want to land the subdivision and servicing bylaw as well, that because it has impacts on the development community. The number of inquiries and construction activity is also increased just with the growth in real estate in our community. So that results in more phone calls to my department, more email questions from realtors and people inquiring about what they can do with their land. So that all has an impact on staff. And then finally, in terms of challenge, in 2021, we had a lot of transition, I'd say more on the earlier stages where we had a new bylaw officer start. We had our secretary go on mat leave, which we have a young lady now covering that mat leave position. And we also lost a planner, but we were able to fill that position successfully as well. So I think we're well set up moving forward, but it was that staff turnover was a challenge that we had to address in 2021. Next slide. As far as 2022 priorities, want to maintain the focus that actually was established by our previous CEO, Anthony Haddad, on building relationships in the development industry. Just as an example, I just a few weeks ago attended my first meeting with the Canadian Home Builders Association, and I tend to keep going to those meetings for the South Okanagan region as a representative of the District of Summerland, and building those relationships with the building industry. We want to move forward with the RFP and the implementation of the software in early of 2022 and start that implementation process, which we forecast will probably be at least a year and a half to potentially 2 years of going through that process of implementation. We want to continue with our bylaw update work with building the building bylaw, getting that adopted by council, the review of that bylaw with potential implementation of step code, the short-term rentals adoption process, consider a review of the traffic bylaw, and then also, like I mentioned yesterday, is a new project from the planning department to look at secondary homes and carriage houses on agricultural land, but also in residential areas as a housing supply type of project, but mostly in response to the change in ALC regulations that are now allowing secondary homes within the ALR. And then finally, we want to land a number of projects that have been priority projects of this council before the election. The Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan, the Eco-Village Design Concept, and a decision on the sale of the Eco-Village lands, and then the Okanagan Food and Innovation Hub we hope to get going on by summer of 2022. Next slide. So staffing resources, this shows briefly, there has been some growth over the last couple of years within the development services area. In 2021, we had the bylaw officer and the business license officer, that one FTE moved from corporate services to development services, because before it was under the corporate services area. And then what we are asking for in this budget process is the consideration of a new staff position. It'd be a Development Services Secretary 2 position, which primarily is targeting our customer service enhancements for our department. The idea behind the Secretary 2 is that they would complete plan reviews, and the position would be enrolled in the building official in training program in order to do those plan reviews, which would help in us achieving a reduced timeline for our building permits. As well, this individual will primarily be responsible for the administrative functions of both the building inspection and the bylaw enforcement areas. And so having some additional capacity in that area is going to help with our building officials and bylaw enforcement officer being out in the field and responding to requests from customers for inspections for ongoing projects for the building side, but also complaints as they're coming in for bylaw enforcement. As well, this secretary is going to be a lead role in helping us with the short-term rental licensing implementation, and we are expecting a number of increases in work and demand with the issuance of this new type of license that we'll be potentially issuing in 2022. So this is still a conditional item as we move forward in the budget. That's dependent on whether council goes forward with a license regime. But on top of that as well would be software that this position will be able to help us with the implementation of software for those two functional areas, bylaw enforcement and building. Next slide. And last slide here, just in terms of an overview of our actual budget request coming from my department area. We are forecasting that if council does move forward with the implementation of a short-term rental license regime, and based on the current fee amount that we're projecting for and recommending to council for a short-term rental license being $500, we're projecting a revenue amount of $75,000 in additional revenue to the development services area, and $20,000 of that $75,000 amount is earmarked right now within the budget to a third-party contractor to help us with the enforcement side of of monitoring the short-term rental websites, such as Airbnb and VRBO. There's also an additional service of providing 24-hour a hotline for any complaints with regards to any short-term rentals that would be linked to our bylaw enforcement team. And then the other $55,000 we are proposing to offset to the new staff position, being the Development Services Secretary 2. In addition to that revenue, we're also forecasting increases from comparison to 2021, at least, in revenue from both building permits as well as our planning and development applications. And so that is helping offset the tax requisition by a small amount. But we all have also increased our budget a bit to include additional training for junior staff that we have within my department area. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't here for your presentation in regards to your Development Services Secretary 2, but I do know that the BOABC, before you can even consider looking at anything to do with prints or issue permits, you have to be a qualified building inspector and be a regular member of the BOABC. So I'm just kind of wondering, is perhaps the heading of a Development Services Secretary 2 misleading, considering they would have to be a member of the Building Officials Association of British Columbia, which would then put them into a Plan Checker 1 or into a Building Inspector 1. So I did reach out. I was a director with the BOABC for 9 years. I did reach out to the BOABC and ask them if this was very similar to Alberta, where they did have training programs for clerical through the Safety Codes Council, and at this time they don't. So I'm just wondering. I'm having a little bit of difficulty with the terminology for your Secretary 2. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Patton, to answer that. We're hoping to take advantage of this new program, this building official and training program that's been offered by BOABC. It would require them to still be members of the association before they would be allowed to do work in accordance with being a building official. We are hoping to create a job description for this role that would make it a requirement of the person being hired to have the level of certification to become a member within that program and to be eligible for that program upon hiring. And in terms of the actual wording of the position, it probably could have been a different word that would be preferable, but we are restricted by what's within our Schedule A with our union. And this was a role previously that if you remember, Dawn Booth used to be in as our secretary, and she transitioned from our secretary to a building official role using this level within our salary grid. So that's why it's referred to as a Secretary 2. It requires a higher level of training and technical expertise than just our normal secretary being a Secretary 1. So hopefully that addresses some of your questions.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah. One thing that was a difference with Dawn Booth was when Dawn took her level 1, the Building Act wasn't in play. And so when the Building Act was coming into play, your predecessor, Corey Gain, when she brought that forward, that was the reason that we as council chose to elevate Dawn Booth into that level 1 position as a building inspector. So because she already had her level 1 certification. So I think this one is, we could, through the province and through BOABC, we have to tread very carefully on what we call these positions because, as you know, we can be fined by having unqualified people. Now, with the Building Act, we can be fined as a municipality for having unqualified people engaging in this type of work. So I understand the inspector in training, but I do feel that we have to call it what it is, and that's a building inspector position and not a development services secretary position. Thanks.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just looking at the value of building construction, basically for the past 3 years, we're in record numbers. This year looks like we'll be, top of in history of construction value here in Summerland. Do you feel this puts a lot of pressure on other departments, such as our electrical department and our public works department? With their current staffing, the more monies that come in, the more pressure we put on these other departments, because there's all sorts of water service hookups or power to be dealt with.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Van Alphen, yeah, I think there definitely is an impact to other department areas. Every new development area that we create, Hunter's Hill is a good example of this, where we are seeing a lot of growth in that area and new building permits being generated, but there's also a corresponding impact to our works department for additional maintenance required, and but also impacts to our electrical utility for expansion of the utility to that area, and corresponding impacts of just even going through the development process of reviewing plans and that type of thing. So yeah, there is corresponding impacts. It's like the software, as an example, it has in linkages with those two functional areas, the utilities as well as public works, in order to try to improve and create some capacity on reviewing those development inquiries as they come forward as part of the construction process. But there is going to be an impact to those areas because of growth.
Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if the $75,000 projected revenue for the short-term rental licenses is that based on the premise that all the existing short-term rentals will continue to be short-term rentals?
Yeah, good question. Through the chair to Councillor Holmes. Yeah, in our projection, we forecasted around, I think, 80% of the existing rentals being, well, maybe a little more than that, 85%, I think, being licensed. We want to get quite active if we are successful with council in terms of putting something in place in, say, January, February next year. We want to get active right away in the start of the year to engage with the short-term rentals and get them licensed up. That third-party contractor will help us with gathering locations, addresses, and statistics of the existing rentals that are currently being advertised on those websites, and providing us lists for us to start our enforcement process if they're not coming in, as an example. Yeah, it wasn't 100% of uptake that we're forecasting with that number, but it's around 80, 85, I'd say, % of total rentals right now.
I have a question about the 75,000 as well. The 20,000 that you have kind of earmarked for the contractor, is that $20,000 ongoing year over year, or do you anticipate that in the initial collection of data that will take more financial resources than in subsequent years? I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, it's an estimate. We did get a couple of quotes from companies that provide this service. They were all within the same range of each other. maybe a bit under that, but we were being conservative with the $20,000 amount just to provide a little bit of cushion there. It sounds like this is a service that's provided to other jurisdictions who've went forward with a licensing regime and have got a company to help them with the monitoring piece of it, because they have their own software to scroll through these websites and to find all of these short-term rentals that are listed everywhere on the interweb, and provided us data on their location and what they're advertising weekly, so that we can catch these short-term rentals immediately. So it's a service that we're expecting that will continue. I don't see a lot of growth in the amount over time. It's a pretty flat rate that they charge, depending on probably the size of the community.
Thank you. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just devil's advocate, I guess. So there's lots of Airbnbs or vacation rentals on farms right now. Could they convert to agritourism versus Airbnb? And the license fee would be much less than the $500 fee?
Yeah, through the chair, through Councillor Van Elfen, I think that's a good question with regards to where we want, and that's something that we'll be discussing further with Council, where do we want vacation rentals or short-term rentals, whatever we're calling it, to be located. Right now, what we're proposing is they be restricted to on agricultural land. So the only opportunity for someone to operate an Airbnb or something like that would be through the agritourism accommodation provisions, and that separate scheme we have. And you're right, it would be cheaper for that approach. But if council agrees with that approach, then that would be the only alternative, is to go through the agritourism accommodation license instead of a short-term rental license.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Brad. Your turn, Joe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll start out briefly with some of the 2021 tangible accomplishments within the department. There's lots that goes on behind the scenes that we really don't see and don't end up in the accomplishment section. But the more visible ones, well, some of them are still designs actually. In 2021, we completed the Canyon View water main design. That's up at the perpetual slide area. That one is going out to tender this week, so we'll be seeing that one built next year. As well, the Washington Avenue Sewer Extension Design Project. Council might remember this as a local area service that was requested last year. That one is also, the design is complete and it will be tendered for next year. Some of the completed projects, the Peach Orchard Walkway was completed, as everyone's probably walked along there this year. As well, the electrical vehicle charging stations were quite successful this year. And while not exactly related to that, the district also, as we heard yesterday, received the Climate Action and Energy Award, which is a nice accomplishment. As with every year, we had quite a few fleet additions in 2021. Many of them are on the roads working right now. Others are on order, and we're not really sure when we're going to receive them, sometime hopefully mid next year for some of them. As with everywhere, there's a tough time getting some of the vehicles this year. Some of the landfill accomplishments for the year, many of them compliance related. The first thing we did was the covenant. This was the declaration of the landfill was completed. The effluent permit, fencing, classification, and a certified operator for the landfill. The reporting from 2020 was completed. And as well, the organics processing facility, all the design was done and the tendering. And as council heard yesterday, that will be tendered in January for construction in Q2, Q3 of next year. Some additional improvements up there were odor mitigation and some additional testing that and monitoring that is required. Still with the landfill, I imagine council heard about it, but the alternative daily cover was implemented this year, and those are those large steel plates that are used to basically reduce the airspace used by the landfill to cover it every day. We also continued with the 2 unlimited yard and garden waste collections. I think there's one coming up very soon now, the second one. We actually had an increase in our compost sales. It was 50% over what we budgeted for this year, which is good. We completed 3 one-day recycling depots and 1 household hazardous waste roundup. The hazardous waste roundup isn't done each year. It's done every 3 or 4 years, I believe. But the 3 one-day recycling depots are done each year, and they were all very successful. One was a little bit less attended because it ended up being a long weekend. So a few less people attended, but still successful nonetheless. And we'll also be doing the 2021 aerial photo, which we do every year up at the landfill. So our challenges for 2021 and 2022 and probably the next few years are very consistent. Landfill compliance will continue to be one of our top priorities. We're moving to get into compliance, but it is a long process, and we're working hard to get there. Aging infrastructure is one that our asset management program has definitely identified, but with all the aging infrastructure, we do have to plan to replace it accordingly. So that's definitely going to be something for us to focus on in the coming year. One that wasn't identified last year, but we're definitely seeing moving forward in all departments is the design and construction cost increases and shortages. So this year there were, as many are aware, things like lumber went up in price astronomically, and that really is hard when you have a set budget earlier in the year when numbers like that increase. We're hoping that maybe they'll come back to normal and we can budget accordingly, but those are the things we're going to have to look at in the coming year. And then, as we talked about yesterday, the flood recovery project approvals, the floods happened in 2017 and 2018, and we're still awaiting approvals. That's something that we continue to work with the province to obtain, and hopefully we will get some construction projects in the coming year following those approvals. So the priorities for 2022, it's going to be a get it built type of year. We have many construction projects, as we've just talked about, that are either designed and tendered or under tender or ready to be designed. Those include the Canyon View Road water main, the Eneas Creek improvements, and the Washington Avenue sewer. All of them are designed and ready for tender or being tendered. So those will happen next year. Giants Head Road water main and road reconstruction, council will hear more about that at the next council meeting. There is one design, the Victoria Road South. This is an intersection and safety improvement project that we'll be designing in the coming year. As well, the organic matter recycling facility construction, that'll be tendered in January, with construction expected to be finished in Q3 of next year. So that's an exciting project. And then there's the subdivision and development servicing bylaw update. This is one that various members of the Works and Infrastructure staff will be heavily involved in looking at the historical documents and the ones we want moving forward, in the hopes of having that document to council in the middle of next year. Some of our priorities from the landfill perspective, the operational certificate, we're working through many items in that. The final cover for the original landfill area, this is a 5-year capital budget with the design in 2022 or 2023. Again, we have to have qualified professional engineers that'll be signing off on this project. As part of our organics facility project, we have to have a leachate management and collection system project completed. So that's well underway, as well as some other documents that either need to be replaced or updated. The master DOC plan, the life cycle plan, the gas and generation, and the OC amendment. Those are all projects that need to be updated every 5 years. The master DOC plan is required next year with the life cycle and gas the following year. So we're looking to advance those projects to ensure we meet the requirements of the province. Okay, with staffing, as council is aware, we're looking to add a health and safety coordinator to the Works and Infrastructure Department next year. This will be a district-wide resource if it gets approval from council. So while reporting to Works and Infrastructure, this person will be assisting the entire organization in our health and safety plan. As council's aware, there was a little bit of reorganization in the last year with water and wastewater divisions being moved to the utilities department. And the state sustainable coordinator position starting next week will move up to the Works and Infrastructure Department as well. And we do have the engineering tech for the Environmental Services Department. That term ends in September of this year. So our 2022 FTEs is 33 and a half full-time and 10 students that come just in the summer months. And then finally, with the slight restructuring that happened, I just put a little table up there just so you can see what the Works and Infrastructure mapping looks like. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Councillor Van Elfen and then Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to Joe, if I may. The Canyon View water main replacement, that's just not your basic pipe. That's going to be some high tech.
Yes, through the mayor. It's going to be HDPE pipe, which allows for flexibility. And the way it's going to be installed as well will allow a little bit of flex in it so that we know that the ground is shifting. We're hoping that it won't shift a whole lot now that this pipe will be replaced, but it is designed to accommodate that.
Go ahead, thanks.
The Victoria Road South design, what intersection is that?
Through the mayor, it's actually several intersections. There's I think it's Beavis Place is where there's a crosswalk right now, and so one of the ideas or one of the project components will be making that a little bit safer for the crosswalks. This might be flaring it a little bit to sort of constrict traffic at that point. It's small safety improvements such as that it'll be. I don't know the full extent of it. I haven't quite worked through that yet, but it was a project that was identified a few years back. So I'll have to look into it a bit more prior to actually going to an RFP.
If I may, does ICBC still give funding for the safety improvements for projects like that?
I'm not sure about this project, but they have historically. I've worked with ICBC on many projects that do provide funding. So we will definitely look into that if that hasn't already been established.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Carlson.
Just to follow on that, I think you would get a lot of letters of support from local families if that was something that might support an application to ICBC.
Thank you.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When in this process will we be talking about what roads might need repaving?
Through the mayor, with roads that might be repaving this year, a lot of the paving will be through the construction projects that will be happening, such as the Canyon View water main, the discussion in 2 weeks' time about Giants Head Road repaving. Those are the main ones for the coming year, and then some on Washington Avenue.
Because I'm thinking our main street doesn't look very good. Matter of fact, it's almost bad. Embarrassing. Is that on the radar at all? And can we add that to some discussion as whether it might be cost effective to do it sooner rather than later?
Yeah, through the mayor, that was definitely identified as a road that's not in the best condition in the district. And part of this year's 10-year water and roads budget will likely identify that as one of the priority projects for coming year. the will of council to pave any road can come up during discussions through the CAO, obviously. But if council would like to prioritize something, that discussion can definitely happen.
And I think it checks a few boxes as far as traffic condition, visibility, you know, the use. And my understanding is that, well, I know all the infrastructure underneath it is 30 years old, which is not the oldest. So perhaps a mill and a reset, whatever they call that process, might be sufficient for that area.
Yeah, through the mayor. When the roads, some of the alligator cracking that we see there is a sign that potentially the base and sub-base have failed. And when that happens, when it's sort of a site-specific aging, quite often you actually have to do a full replacement of the substructure material in those locations. It's when you have, like with a highway, for example, where you can tell that the entire thing is failing at about the same rate that the mill and fill really works well. But definitely something we can look at.
So how does it happen if they put the same material down the whole length of the road and such, and you know, different types of materials at different levels and stuff, that it should fail in one or two particular spots?
It could be a number of reasons. Sometimes it's the material underneath the subgrade is very, very free draining, and it pulls the fines out of it, which actually makes the asphalt collapse a little bit, and you see that alligator cracking. Potentially, and I don't know if this to be the case, but if there was an area that wasn't quite compacted properly during construction, you can see localized settling or failures such as that. Or it could be probably not on Main Street, but sometimes you see a natural spring a subsurface spring goes through. In hillside communities such as Summerland, you'll see that on some of the hillside roads more. Springs just pop up and pull all the fines out of the sub-base and base material, and you'll see those type of failures.
So my next question is really like, what is the will of council? Do you think we should ask staff to invest any time in giving us an assessment of Main Street? You know, at least some sort of an idea of whether it's going to be a big, little, medium type job, and it should be done sooner or later?
Sorry, before I go to that, I have a couple of councillors' hands up, and Brad wanted to speak perhaps on the downtown development process. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for the opportunity to jump into another department area slides. But just at the risk of becoming public enemy number one, because I agree that the state of Main Street is not ideal, but I would caution council from making any decisions to move forward with any repaving in the near term without having the downtown plan completed, just because there could be changes to the streetscape as coming out of our consultants' recommendations. The narrowing of the road width to increase the pedestrian size on both sides of the street has been talked about. Parking orientation has been talked about, as well as the driveway lanes. And I think we should have the plan, which is expected in July, hopefully in place. Then we can, and as part of that plan, have a priority setting of different assets within the downtown area that should be upgraded, probably with Main Street being a top priority.
Thank you. I just want to go to councillors Carlson and Traynor as well.
Thank you. When you're looking at on our 2022 priorities, and there's a list of things that are, you know, construction priorities, design priorities, I'm just wondering, when there's a subdivision application or a development application and that developer is responsible for improvements and upgrades or for putting in a sewer, do those things get put onto a list like this, or do we consider those additional to what our council priorities are?
Through the mayor, and please step in if you'd like, Brad, but those are typically separate. They're infrastructure that development needs to move forward. So they're not funded by the district per se. So they'll show up probably in a different budget item. I think we only actually budget for them when we actually accept that infrastructure as district owned, and I guess that's probably just more for accounting purposes. So they won't show up, the TCAs, so they won't show up in these project lists.
So just to follow up then, can you explain why Washington Avenue sewer, which I understand is going to be for Mountain View, paid for by Mountain View, if it's not, is that why it's on there? Is the district putting that in for them?
Correct, through the mayor. That's a local area service project. So while Mountain View initiated it, there's several other property owners that are participating in it. So the district took it over as a project to get completed. So it's one of those ones that could, maybe it wouldn't show up, or maybe it may show up on a list like this, but it is one that we're spending significant time on. So we just wanted to highlight it to council. And it is one that council probably remembers from earlier in the year and is wondering where it's at. And it is being tendered right now. So.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect example of the question that Councillor Van Elfen had earlier about how the two departments interact. And obviously, it's critical that there is lots of communication between departments. Councillor Traynor.
Just a quick response to what Councillor Barkle was saying. I agree with Brad that we should probably wait for a downtown plan before we consider any repaving of downtown, any of the streets. But I do agree the road does need to be repaved and the rainbow crosswalks need to be repainted as well. For me, I think that Giant's Head is really important, and I'm glad that that's on the list, as well as Victoria Road South. I hadn't seen that in our priorities before, but I hear a lot about that intersection at Beavis. On the Summerland Mummies Facebook page, a lot of parents have issues with that crosswalk. I guess people don't see it, so they just drive straight through. So I think that one's really important. So for me, when we're trying to figure out which roads need to be done, safety for me is a really big one, like which intersections and which roads are causing safety concerns. So I'm really glad to see that. And then obviously Canyon View, that needs to be done as well. So Giant's Head, Canyon View, and Victoria, plus Washington, those are some big projects to do in 1 year. So wouldn't want to put too much on the list, so we can be realistic about getting it done.
Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Van Elfen.
No, I agree on the Beavis crosswalk situation. I lived south of there for many years, and that's a nasty area. And also, if you notice over by IGA, there is a light indicator. You push a button and it, warns people. And I think we need to look at that type of a situation there, narrowing and, traffic calming and all those things. And I've noticed it too on the Mummies page. So thank you.
Did you want to have some more conversation, Councillor Barkle, at this time?
Well, it sounds like we should make sure that the goal in the coming year, 2022, is to be able to answer all the questions we need answered as far as being able to repave Main Street in, say, 2023 or something, and not have anything.
And I think Brad was saying July of next year, more or less. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, in response to Councillor Barkle's, again, sorry to hijack different department areas presentation. I think it's prudent to do the planning, like you indicated. Like if road resurfacing is going to be a priority, like that's something that our engineering department could start planning for now for 2023, right? So, and that could be in conjunction with the downtown plan.
Right. Councillor Barkle.
That's kind of what I meant. I mean, we might have a plan of what things might look like, but then the engineering aspects, it could be underground wires and all of those things that fit into it too. So I'd like to see that that everything is considered so that we're ready to think seriously about it. Thank you.
Good then. Okay, Councillor, I'm not sure who was first there. Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Van Elfen.
So just a question on that planning. So, I mean, one of the issues with Main Street is half of it is parallel parking and half of it is angled parking. And one of the discussion points in the downtown task force is that it's kind of out of sync. And so and then we also talk about, how do you make it more pedestrian friendly and all that sort of stuff. So there's it'll be something we'll be talking about all next year, I think. But there's a good chance that we might want to change the way Main Street currently is looked at. So my question is, so can you do that kind of planning, knowing that, well, it might not be exactly the way it is right now? Is it still worth doing that kind of engineering work?
Yeah, through the mayor. It is tough. If something significant was to change, then some of that engineering work would be essentially out the window. If you're looking to widen the street, or if you're looking to add any different infrastructure, or say add EV charging stations, or whatever the plan is for the road, it definitely changes what the design would look like. And the efforts we put in now, some of them would be lost for sure if there were changes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. But I respect and totally understand the planning aspect of it. But in the meantime, we don't need to ignore it. Like, there's some easy repairs there. There's some real easy wins. We call in our blacktop patching people, and they could come in and put down some hot mix material, roll it in nicely, and we could, give us that time, that lead time we need to do the planning. But in the meantime, we don't walk away from it. Let's put some effort into, let me rephrase that. Someone I know ran the farmer's market, and I put pylons and cones in the middle of the street because we had pedestrians literally tripping over themselves, like elderly people falling, on their face because of the asphalt condition. So, I mean, stuff can be done. And to give us that lead, that grace period for the planning. And then Washington Avenue, we're going to do the sewer on Washington. Just do a quick hard right and let's catch Blair while we're at it. Just kidding.
Through the mayor, if I may. Through to Councillor Van Elfen, some of those have been identified. I think Mayor and Council maybe have been CC'd on a few emails of late of some identified patches that we've noticed around the school areas, and areas such as the high volume areas and high visibility areas. We'll definitely look at that. Patching in November is not the ideal time to do it, but those are things when the paving plants reopen in the spring and early, sort of late spring. That's the time to do it. So we'll definitely look at the patching program. Thanks.
Okay, are we going to let Joe go free now for a moment? No? Okay, Graham.
He's free. I was just going to add, I will take it offline with Brad and Joe, and we'll take a look at those areas Joe's talking about and the parallel planning. And I did hear council discussion on that clearly and understand it's a focus and priorities. So I will take that back as something for my follow-up.
Great, thank you. And before we get into utilities, we're going to take a quick break until, say, 5 to 3. So that'll be probably the only break that we need, but kind of halfway through. Thanks. Okay, folks, we're going to get started again. Aaron will be back shortly, and Marty as well, I presume. Okay, please go ahead, Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to be up here because I think last year I was actually pushed into the next day because we were last and we went long. So just happy to hit the pulpit. So just a note on some of the restructuring that we did. If we can go back to the last slide, if you don't mind. So we've moved the electric utility, wastewater, and water utility into kind of one department, the utilities department. You'll notice in some of Joe's slides, Director of Works and Infrastructure, there's mention of wastewater projects and water projects, Washington Ave and Canyon View, for instance. And that's because Joe is managing those within his department. So the Works and Infrastructure Department does still provide services for and works on the distribution system, the collection system. So there's a bit of crossover there. So on with the electric utility. So sorry, Kendra, if you don't mind, back. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I just want to stop at that photo there and just point out to council that's taken at our training grounds. So the PLT in the kind of orange is a new recruit, Mike Thompson. Mike just recently finished his 6 months probation, amazing hire, great guy. And behind him, we have kind of in the black face covering there. We should get him a dark hat. Actually, he could be the Darth Vader. But Bill Wilson, and so this is an interview that we're doing with Mike and up at the training grounds. And so we go through a pretty regimented interview process. And those two guys, amazing guys, great crew. I can't say enough about the electrical crew. But yeah, thanks, Kendra. We'll just go on to the next slide there.
Sorry, did you say this was part of an interview?
That picture was
oh, my
part
goodness.
of Mike's interview. So we do really put him through it. Yeah, and so he did amazing. Great guy, beautiful family, good addition. So the accomplishments for electric utility. We did a lot this year, but I'll just touch on a couple highlights. I won't read them all. But obviously the solar and storage project, a lot of heavy lifting on that this year. Hired our owner's engineer, got the RFP written, all the specifications. So and that RFP is out and evaluated at this point. We'll bring that to council. And the energy strategy. One I want to point out here is the brushing program. We've had a lot of success with brushing in the last few years. We've been spending a little more on that and doing a competitive process and lumping all of our brushing into kind of one RFP for the year instead of doing it piecemeal as things come up. And that's helped with the outages. So, I mean, you may notice when we have those big wind events here, no one's power is turning off or very few outages. So the brushing program's working really well. We're just going to continue with that instead of doing it piecemeal again, kind of a program. So that's money well spent. I'll point out the inventory improvements sort of in the middle of the slide there. We spent quite a bit of time going through our inventory top to bottom, every nut and bolt, and updating our documentation, updating how the crew goes through and does year-end checks on what we have in stock, et cetera, update VADM, tons of work done on that. So it was another big heavy lift. And in concert with that, the procurement improvements. So we also hired Mike as the bottom bullet point there, a new power line technician. And well, one more mention is the subdivision estimating. So that was a request of Brad, Development Services Director. So we wanted to make it a little more streamlined for people and give them a little more information up front. When they're doing a subdivision, can we give them their electric utility estimate up front before they actually make the decision to subdivide? And that way they have all the information, they know what the cost is, and they can go ahead and make that kind of business decision. So we've been doing that, and I think that's been pretty successful. So challenges. These are just high-level bullet points here, but the main challenge, I think, sort of being consistent with other departments, is in our staffing levels. So we have 40% new employees in the electric utility because we've done, I mean, it is a small group of 5, so, and we do have 2 new people. But that presents in itself a lot of challenges bringing someone up to speed. But we've also seen, as you can see in the graph there, a huge increase in service requests over the last couple of years during the pandemic. So I'll just point out in 2019, 82 service requests, and in 2021, 216. And so that's sort of year to date for today. We are not staffed to continue that level of service requests. We're hoping that in 2022 that we'll see that number come down, but maybe this is the new normal for Summerland. So right now, effectively, our maintenance program is on pause while we do service requests. We're doing service requests every day, and that's all the crew does, is service request after service request after service request. And so that puts a lot of stress on the electric utility and the foreman and myself, but also on public works, or on the guys at the actual yards, because they receive material and all that material's coming in. And so there's, you know, it's just layer upon layer. The whole group feels that pressure. And same with Brad's team, receiving those requests, all the administration behind it. Service requests. So this is the 3rd utility that I've sort of revamped the service request system at, and we're working through that right now here. And it's amazing every time how complicated a service request workflow is. And here it's especially complicated because the municipalities, it's not just an electric utility, but it's a whole municipality that's involved in a lot of different departments. So we did map all of that in preparation for the Brad software that's coming up. Okay. 2022. So obviously the solar project is main priority. We also would like to get into some of our maintenance activities, get back to them. So that's condition assessments on all of our poles and transformers, et cetera, underground infrastructure, and get into some of those replacements. The condition assessment is called test and treat. So we want to get back to our test and treat program. And you'll see that in the 2022 budget. We also want to have a look at our metering practices, have a look at that from top to bottom, review that, and we'll be into collective bargaining as well. Resources, same as before, no change here. 2022 budget. So you'll see the solar project in there, fiber system upgrades. It's a project that's tied to the solar project. We do need to have communication systems for that project to work like we need it to. There's some side benefits there for more IT infrastructure, and also water SCADA system as well. Then we have vault replacement on Victoria and Rand, that's by Nestors. We have a Wharton Underground design, so that ties into some of the conversation that was taking place earlier on the downtown and condition of roads and downtown plan. We are planning to price out what it will cost to put the Wharton power line underground. Those are 2 circuits. It's a significant trench through from all the way along Wharton from the roundabout to Victoria. It would then take a corner at Victoria, past the beanery, then turn left into the alley behind the beanery, right beside the beanery there. So a lot of asphalt taken out there to make that happen. So again, holistic planning for the downtown, that's all part of that. And then there's the downtown streetlight replacements. So we do have all those streetlight bases in front of the new development by the park that do need streetlights. The downtown plan is to identify which type of decorative that council would like to go to, and we have money there to purchase those when the time comes. So there are 31 streetlights to still buy. And then we have 2 vehicle items on here. The on-call truck, that's to replace the existing on-call truck. And then there's a opportunistic sort of buy here with Penticton. They may sell us their used bucket truck, which they have in service right now. And we can use that as a backup because this year We had a couple of our trucks locked out because of safety problems, and we had no backup there. So this would be sort of to back that up. Questions on the electric utility?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How long do you have? Just kidding. At the transformer station on Prairie Valley, there's that line, there's that pole that kind of sits out in the middle of the street. And I remember eons ago, we were talking about that going underground. Is that still contemplated?
Thank you for the question, Councillor, through the mayor. That is part of the design for the Wharton Underground. So we actually have that design on the shelf, just sitting there, and we want to take that design and expand it for the whole Wharton Undergrounding. And so we'll do that project all as sort of one project if council ends up deciding they want to see that. So that's all planned for design for next year. So that's just sort of sitting there waiting.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. With our power outage with Fortis's upgrades that they did, and we had those 2 evening and late night power outages. I know we've talked about it before. Have you ever looked into it further with a BC Hydro backfeed? Like from Falder or Garnet Valley, let's say?
Thank you for the question through the mayor. That is an option, but not today. We need to complete our voltage conversion before we can connect to BC Hydro. Their voltage is different. We have begun discussions with Fortis just to give them a heads up on that it is something we would like to do. Currently, our contract with Fortis is expired, so we are working with our legal counsel to update that. We have some drafts going around, and we have given them notice that we are interested in a backup feed, not as a main feed, but as something we could use in a case like that where we have loss of supply. Yeah.
Who are we using now for pricing? Is it Primary Engineering to do pricing and stuff? So are we competitive, like with Penticton or Beachland for say, when it comes to doing new infrastructure?
Thank you for the question through the mayor. We are competitive. I think the BC municipal electric utilities probably are some of the lowest cost power line construction available. And that's because our internal costs are quite a bit lower than a contractor. We have had some sort of comparisons on if you were in the BC Hydro service territory, what would this exact service cost you there? If you were in the Fortis service territory, what would it cost you there? How do they size their services? And this is just through industry contacts, sort of discussions with colleagues, and because we don't have access officially to how they make those calculations. That's proprietary to them. It's not something they would ever share with us. But through those sort of side conversations, we are competitive. In Summerland, we load our transformers more than those 2 utilities do. And that's a conscious decision, engineering decision on my part, because of our type of customer that we have, mostly residential. We're 75%-ish residential here, and not heavy commercial. So we can load our transformers up a little more without as much risk. So that allows us to have lower cost installations. So there are some things like that, but in general, we charge a lot less. So we pass those costs directly to the customer. And for instance, our vehicle charge out rate, Director of Finance can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's somewhere around $30 an hour. It's pretty low. Those vehicles should be charged out at $300 an hour.
Yeah.
So we don't do that with our customers.
Perfect. Couple quick ones, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Okay, if I can just take a break and go to Councillor Patton, and then I'll come back to you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I know we talked about this last year, and I believe it's where the power line ends at La Punta Norte, where we were talking that where BC Hydro and they could go over the mountain there to hook to our infrastructure, which could give a backup power feed to Peachland and I guess into West Kelowna. And we talked about that last year, and you said that that it is a possibility and that there could be some funding opportunities for us in regards to your voltage conversion if BC Hydro was willing, I guess would be a good word, to look at doing that backup power generation. So am I still on the right track? Like, it's kind of foggy in this head, but I think that's where what we were talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Patton. Through the mayor, yes, to be determined. So it is feasible that Peachland or a portion of Peachland, or maybe all of Peachland, we don't know, we have to do the studies to know, that Summerland could provide power to Peachland in an emergency situation. We would need some infrastructure changes on our side to accommodate that. Peachland would likely need some changes on their side as well. And when I say Peachland, I mean BC Hydro. So that would be a service we could potentially provide BC Hydro. It's technically feasible. And at this point in time, in my discussions with BC Hydro, I haven't gotten any traction on that. But it is a potential solution for some of these fires we're having and having the second backup. The nice thing about the Fortis system and the BC Hydro systems are they're totally separate systems. And so we're uniquely positioned between the two. And we have yet to take advantage of that. And so there's lots of opportunity there.
Thank you. Back to Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to say from my perspective, when you have two giant grids, a small gap between them, I suspect there's probably not a huge interest on the part of Fortis or BC Hydro to connect those two big circles. And, BC Hydro is a Crown corporation, and it is likely something that might be pursued in terms of political advocacy at the right time to generate, the right environment for success to connect. Because I'm not sure at the working level and making a request through and up into those organizations we'll see that connectivity. But it would add community resilience for all the reasons discussed, including risk of fire and everything else. And perhaps, there could be agreement that we're only turning on and off that switch in times of need, as it were, not just, oh, look, BC Hydro is offering cheaper power today, sort of thing. But I think there's some value in exploring that conversation at the appropriate time and likely through some political advocacy, I suspect.
Perhaps similar to the opportunity of connecting services for the Penticton Indian Band, potentially out at their elk farm or the processing, the abattoir and things. Thank you for your patience, and back to you, Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just another couple quick questions. Some communities TELUS is charged to hang their wires on our poles. Here we don't charge TELUS. Have you ever contemplated that we would charge TELUS for putting their infrastructure on our assets?
Great question through the mayor. We do charge TELUS. We have a contract with them. It's in need of updates and an audit on all of the contacts. So in Summerland, there's a couple different ways utilities do this, but in Summerland, we own all of the infrastructure and the communication companies have contacts below our primary line. And similarly with Fortis, they have a transmission line running along Giant's Head, and we have underbuilt structure there, and they charge us a contact. So it's normal practice, and we do have contracts with both Shaw and TELUS, and we do charge them every year. Again, those contracts need updating, and we have budgeted in 2022 draft to actually have a look at those contracts, open them up, and do an audit.
My last question, if I may. So we're looking at the future electrification of our society. I just had a home energy audit performed. I'm looking at a new, unfortunately, electric furnace because I don't have the luxury of natural gas, and a heat pump. I'm probably going to eat macaroni and cheese for the next 10 years. I don't see the benefit. You know what I mean? Like, if we're going to electrify our society, you know, the rates just keep going up. Like, where's the incentive? I guess where my question is leading, I have a farm. I have a second meter. Why am I being charged commercial for the second meter when I don't have a commercial operation? I have a farm. Like, I don't have a winery or a packing house. And I'm just wondering why, you know, because I have the meter, that initial cost is higher than my residential one. And I'm not the only one. There's lots of people in the community that have second meters on their farms, but they're not running a commercial enterprise. And I'm just curious, is that something we could discuss in the future?
I think I'll start. Thanks for the question, Councillor, through the mayor. We don't have, I believe, an agricultural electrical rate. We have residential and commercial that apply to your situation. The commercial rate per kilowatt hour is actually lower than the residential rate. The questions I get from customers are, can I switch from residential to commercial? And I think generally right now, that would require a business license to do that. So if you have a business license, the commercial rate is available to you, is my understanding. And it does shave off a little bit off the kilowatt hour charge. I believe the basic charge is slightly higher. But we can discuss rates when we get into the rate discussion as part of budget. Are we bringing forward to council the usual rate slides comparing Summerland to the surrounding municipalities and across the country, what our rates are? And so we can talk, certainly talk about that in the future.
Okay, Councillor Carlson's next, and then Councillor Barkwell.
I just want to respond to your question or your comment, Councillor, about what's the benefit in looking at the costs of electrifying our economy. But I think that it's a little bit, there's a bigger picture out there. There's a greater cost to not electrifying or not getting away from the fossil fuel economy that we're currently relying on in the global world. You know, in Summerland and in BC, perhaps our energy is greener than in many places, but overall, I think that it's a really big conversation, and the numbers that I don't know what the numbers are, but it's certainly going to cost a lot of money if we don't do it. So I just we need to remember that personal costs of renovating and retrofitting our homes are significant, and a lot of people have done it, but there's also a lot who are hesitant to it. And I think there's going to be more incentives, and I think there should be more incentives. And I don't know if we have had that conversation in the electrical utility, whether we can offer some incentives. I know that Fortis offers things, and BC Hydro does, and even in Nelson, you know, they have a more robust program where they encourage and help do those retrofits in homes in order to make them more efficient. And so I think that as we establish our electrical utility and have this, or I know it's well established, but as we make sure that we are running it very well and it is a business for our community, I do think that that should be part of where we go with it, to make sure that people's homes are, you know, we can somehow offer some incentive, because we're not necessarily eligible for the Fortis ones, but perhaps through Summerland we can talk about that further.
Councillor Barkwell, and then back to you, Councillor Van Elfen.
Well, originally I had a question concerning the second meters on there, but that can be the part of the fees discussion when we get to it. But just to comment on the issue that Councillor Carlson had brought up, one of the ways we could work towards the goals that she's talking about is if our electrical rates aren't subsidizing our property tax rates, which was brought up earlier and will be discussed, I guess, in more depth in the later utility budget.
Thank you. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really appreciate Councillor Carlson's comments. I'm doing this to upgrade. I'm sitting on a 15, 16-year-old furnace, electric. When I bought the home, I removed an oil furnace, and it's time to upgrade again. I had the energy audit. Thank you to a fellow councillor's son who I'm working with. The energy auditor came out, did the audit on my home, which now I qualify for a $5,000 rebate from the federal government, a $2,000 rebate from Fortis, and $500 from the feds to pay for the energy audit, and $200 from Fortis to help me pay for the energy audit. So I'm going to get a brand new system, way more efficient, and I, might be able to move from mac and cheese to wieners and beans here pretty quick. So life's good.
Councillor, yes, we've covered everyone. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. I just want to ask about the downtown streetlight replacements. When we did our walking tour of downtown with the Downtown Plan Task Force, you pointed out that there's three different, I think, kinds of light standards right in the core of downtown. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said like the nice, direct, decorative, attractive ones were the least efficient, and the most efficient ones were the kind of the old, ugly ones. So are you waiting for that decision on how we wanted to standardize the standards before replacing the Memorial Park ones? Is that the thinking?
Through the mayor, yes, there's 3 or 4 decoratives downtown. We currently are maintaining them, so when they burn out, we replace them like for like. The ones that are alongside Memorial Park are empty bases. They do not have streetlights on them, so we're waiting to purchase those. And we would like to, now's the opportunity to make any adjustments to the decoratives downtown, because we have 31 to buy and install. And so, just to refresh memory on that, it's been a couple of years now. So we would like to buy and install those. But if council's going to change the decorative design for downtown and go with something else, we just want to hold off on that buy and wait for those decisions to be made. If you're driving around the downtown at night and you find on Main Street that the lights are on, if you're towards the Shell station, maybe across from Lordco, that area, you'll notice there's 2 streetlights that are white instead of sort of the orangey glow. Those are 2 test bulbs in those streetlights, and these are the decoratives right on Main Street, and they're LED, and they're two different styles that we were just sort of trialing. We've left them up. So if we find that it's council's decision not to replace the decoratives along Main Street, we can start replacing bulbs with LEDs if that is an option. They're not inexpensive though. Yeah, they are sort of a custom installation.
Councillor Carlson, did you have your hand raised? No. Okay, I have a quick question. Is it your thought that the increase in electric services requests is related at all to, well, development, but also to people doing home renovations during COVID when they weren't working? Or what do you think, brought that on?
It's a mix. It's a mix. So we have subdivisions increased. We have a lot of home renovations, hot tubs, et cetera, going in, and so requiring a panel upgrade from a 100 amp service to a 200 amp service. Some of these services are being upgraded from a 200 amp service to a 400 amp service. So it's sort of along the lines of electrification of everything, electric vehicles. you name it. So people are doing renovations to their homes and requiring a panel upgrade. So we are getting a lot of those, but we're also getting a lot of just plain new services. So that would be maybe a garage in the back of the property requiring a full new service, Hunter's Hill. So on Sanborn, we've seen a lot of new services because as those lots are coming up and builders are starting, so we're seeing them there. So yeah, everything's sort of contributing, and it's just tons of construction in Summerland.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
Maybe Director of Electrical Utilities being optimistic and thinking that he will have time to deal with these maintenance issues and such when things slow down in 2022, because Hunter's Hill is just getting in stride. We've got a lot of, I think we're going to continue at least the same pace, and then more and more people are going to be installing electrical vehicle chargers in their garages and such. So it's hard to see any kind of a slowdown.
Any other questions? Councillor Enelf?
Just a comment. I don't think we're going to see slowdowns. I hope we don't see slowdowns. And I'm saying that is I don't want to see, ridiculous sprawling growth everywhere, but how many infill permits have we approved, fourplexes going on old single lot homes in the downtown core? All that's going to require upgrades. It all is, it's all work for our public works people, our electrical utility, and so it's just going to create a lot more work, and it's good. It's good to see the infill. Thank you.
It is good to see the infill. Joel, is it okay to ask you a question about your presentation before we go on to the next set of slides? I'm sorry, I was focusing on making sure that we had, that council was allowed the discussion on the Main Street, potential paving of Main Street, and that went on for a bit. And I forgot to ask the question that I'd written down. So this is about the trail along Ineas Creek that runs down Peach Orchard Road. Where is that at?
Thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. That one's once again in the permitting process. We're awaiting permits to move forward on that. Hopeful to get them in the very near future, but that's one of the 5 or 6 identified projects within the Ineas Creek sort of larger project.
Okay. So until you get those, you're not anticipating putting anything into, like project-wise, into the budget for 2022?
We've got grant funding actually for the project. We just need the approvals from the province for the.
Oh, I see,
project to
I see.
proceed,
Okay.
yes. So we're hopeful the project will proceed, but there are numerous approvals that have to happen first.
So that portion of the project, of the Ineas Creek project, is included in the grant funding?
Yes, that's one of
Okay.
the projects. It's partial grant funding.
Yeah.
So some of it's response costs and some of it's
Right.
additional DFA funding. So there will be some district funds required as well.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Problem.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Bringing my water with me this time.
Any more questions on the electrical utility? I don't think I saw any hands raised. Okay. So on to the water utility, please.
Thank you, Kendra. Okay, so water utility. This is a photo of our Eisentalk. That's the outlet side. So 2021 accomplishments. I'll just highlight a couple here. We did quite a bit of work, just the first bullet point, safety procedures. We did quite a bit of work on those. Of course, at the water treatment plant, we have lots of hazardous material there, so specifically chlorine and confined spaces. So there's quite a bit of work done on getting us into compliance with those. So we're sitting pretty good there. Then the big project for the water utility in the watershed is the Eisentalk low-level outlet pipe and outlet, inlet, and the pipe itself, along with all the riprap and road work and associated. Amazing project, great, and going very well as well. And so we're on track to complete that this year. There was a PRV number 6 replaced, and we're working on the next one already. And then new reservoir and pump house at Hunter's Hill. So again, more infrastructure, and those are two nice new facilities for us, and we've taken those over, and our operators are actively monitoring those. And some improved robustness at the water treatment plant, and that includes sort of VFD cooling, valves, replacements, et cetera. And some of that work came out of this summer and the heat wave that we experienced. Next slide. 2021 challenges. So we did have the heat dome bring us up to capacity of the water treatment plant. And out of that, we're going to be bringing forward to council emergency response plans on how to deal with those situations. And we brought back the water group to help us go through some of that documentation, the committee. During that heat dome, we did have some challenges with staffing at the water treatment plant. So all it takes is one sick person when the plant is at absolute full capacity like that. So we're pretty much almost 24-hour staffing, a lot of call outs, a lot of alarms, and things are really running at maximum capacity. So a lot of stress on staff, and sort of, I'm not sure if we had canceled holidays, but it was sort of all hands on deck for that period of time. And then also we have the dam safety regulations are getting more and more stringent, and we're seeing increased dam regulations. So we are keeping on top of that. That is one of the challenges. Next slide. So 2022, on council's strategic priority list, we have the watershed management. So that includes 2 documents: the source water assessment update. So that's a document we have currently, and we're doing an update to. And then we're working on that this year. I'm not sure if we've awarded that to someone yet, but the RFP did close about 2 weeks ago. And then we have the source water protection plan. That'll be a new plan for Summerland, and we'll be working on that next year. So I've mentioned the emergency response plan. A lot of effort will be going into that. That has to do with the plant running to capacity and how staff should respond to that, but also things like a spill in our watershed, or maybe we have one of the inflows dry up because of drought or what have you. So there's 100 different things that can happen to our water system, water main breaks, et cetera. How do we respond to those? So we're taking this sort of as a holistic approach and doing an ERP, emergency response plan, as opposed to just a policy on how to address capacity at the plant, because there's a lot of things that can happen to our water system. So that's what we'll be working on there. Water master plan will be reviewed with council early in 2022, and our regular dam safety activities. Just a little mention here from some of the council questions and comments. So we are likely in 2023 going to be looking for an electrician to help out with some of the load on the. We only have one electrician in Summerland at this point in time, and that person's permit covers everything from the lights in this building to the actual electric systems in the plants. So huge scope of work for one individual, and we are seeing a lot of work requests for that person, and simply can't keep up. So we'll probably be stretching through 2022 and then looking for a request there in 2023. Okay, 2022 budget. So the ERP is in there. Eisentalk spillway design. So we'll be looking after the Eisentalk low-level outlet replacement. We'll be looking at the spillway. For a couple of the big items on here, we've got the water treatment plant hypo system that we'd like to convert to from chlorine. It's an important project that we'd like to see go through to get us away from that hazardous chlorine material, and then the Giant's Head water separation design. And that is for work that is not specifically for Giant's Head Road, but there's some other small locations that we need to separate before we can actually separate Giant's Head. So there's a few locations we need to work on there. And then the Canyon View Road. Questions?
Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Patton.
When will we be receiving the assessment for the possibilities of raising Durst Dam? Eisentalk, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Durst is already raised.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the mayor, we don't have that report yet. So they have done drilling and taken samples to determine what that's going to be, but we'll have that report, I'm told, late November.
Late November?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just a comment on the water protection, or watershed protection. First time I ever went to Eisentalk, you had to have a key to get through the gate that would lead up to that area. You know, it was well protected in the old days, prior years, and now there's just so much usage in the forest and logging and such. It really is something that we now have to address, and I think it's a very important project here.
Councillor Patton and then Councillor Holm.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. In red on your 2022 budget, the Giant's Head water separation design, I thought that was already done.
Thank you for the question. Through the mayor, this is for locations that aren't specifically on Giant's Head. So there is a little bit of work to do near the water treatment plant to enable us to actually separate at Giant's Head. So there's some small pockets that we need to separate in order to complete the separation on Giant's Head. So this is money to complete those designs.
Where is PRV 14? And how much disruption will it cause the community when that work's being done?
Sorry, Councillor, can you repeat that last bit there?
And just so I just wonder how much of the community will be affected by it.
Councillor, through the mayor, I could pull up the map and have a look. I don't know off the top of my head where 14 is, but and I don't know what portion of town is going to be interrupted. 6 was down by Crescent Beach, and so we did that one there, and it did require some interruptions. So I can get back to you with that though.
Okay, I have a question, and it's about the source protection update in the plan. And I think maybe the emergency response plan too, because that's associated with water as well, right? Like kind of all aspects. I can see perhaps how the source water protection plan and the other, can't remember what it's called, source water assessment update could qualify for the BC Watershed Security Fund that's being established in BC. I'm wondering if you have any inkling on whether or not something like that emergency response plan specific to water would be part of that watershed security. Do you think that is a close enough tie-in? I guess the more funding we can get, the better.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It does sound similar. I haven't looked at the grant guideline for that. So maybe we'll have a look at that and see if something qualifies there. But it sounds like it should. So yeah, we'll have a look at that. And I think maybe we saw an email from you previously on that subject at some point.
Yes, when I was part of the group that was making the recommendations to the province. Yeah. Okay. That's it for the water utility. So on to the wastewater utility, please.
Okay, wastewater fund. Next slide, please. Less activity in the wastewater plant and associated system. We do have the Washington Ave work that's being done, but that's not listed here. So for 2021, Hunters Hill does have a lift station associated with that development. So we have been there for commissioning, participated in that, and the operators have taken that over. So we are actively using that station. We don't have much inflows there currently because there's not very many houses developed there, but we would like to see some more inflows at that station. And then the HVAC work at the wastewater treatment plant, we are actively working on that right now and hopefully have that completed by the end of the year. Thank you. 2021 challenges, mostly in odor control. So at the landfill, we did do a lime ad at the plant to reduce the odors at the landfill. And so that was pretty successful. We actually had some comments from residents that that was working. So that was great there. And then Peach Orchard Park, we also had some odor control measures that we put in place there. 2022 priorities, more safety work. So the wastewater plant does need some time spent on their confined space procedures and on their lockout tagout procedures, and hoping that we're going to see our new safety officer take this on as one of the high priority tasks when we see that position come in. We have continued regulatory compliance and our primary clarifier design. Once we'll be talking about that with council when we start getting into the capital program, but we are looking to add a primary clarifier at the wastewater treatment plant. Resources, no change there, still 4 operators. And some notes here on the 2022 budget. We have the filter building renovations that we still like to complete. The UV disinfection upgrades, this was I believe, a $750,000 project at one point, and we found a solution that's quite a bit less expensive, but accomplishes the same thing. So we're looking to execute that next year, and then get into our primary clarifier design. This is to add a second clarifier. And then a small forklift request there because currently the plant operators, when we have deliveries of some of our materials and they don't have a truck to actually offload it, they're hand offloading that, and it's a bit of a back injury risk, that sort of thing. So we could certainly use a forklift down there to offload some of these materials in barrels, et cetera. And then we have a sewer expansion fund of $100,000.
Councillor Barkle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What is this clarifier? Is it something new to the sewage treatment plant? I mean, I thought we had a fully designed, fully functional, even expanded now. That about 5 years ago, we got fully funding for another screen and everything. What is the clarifier for, and why would we need that, and how much will it cost?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the mayor, could we just go back to the start slide with the photograph there, if you don't mind, Kendra? So the clarifier is in the background here, and it's basically, if it fails, then we've lost our water treatment capabilities there. So it is a redundancy. That clarifier is also has some mechanical issues with it. There's some spinning equipment that is inside there that moves the material around. And so that is reaching end of life and is currently in need of some maintenance. So as a single point of failure, we'd like to see a second clarifier on that site, and we're expecting that would be located on the adjacent properties to this site where the rental properties are. Currently for next year, it's design only. And so that'll help us with our estimate and see what the costs are associated with that. But it is kind of the big single point of failure for the wastewater plant.
Go ahead, Councillor Barklow.
Anybody else?
I don't see any other hands, so if you'd like to ask your other question.
Thanks. While we have Jeremy up here still, I'd like to go back to the water utility. And I know that there's been discussion for a long time about decommissioning Eneas, but I hadn't noticed Sioux Lake on the list before, otherwise known as Deer Lake, right? And those lakes are in the park. I think they have huge qualitative values for recreation with fishing and moose habitat and all those things. And I really, and then of course you always wonder about if you lose the storage capacity, no matter how small it is, for those dams, will you ever get it back? So before spending a lot of money on, like, how much does it cost a year just to sort of maintain the status quo as a backup is one question. And another question is, what would parks really think about us, reducing the size of those lakes? That would be a big mess, really. If you look at what the Eneas looked like, Eisentalk looked like when it was empty. I think before we spend a lot of money, I think we should get some more of the qualitative comments too.
So, Madam Mayor, I can just respond to that. Yeah, I had some of those same questions when I took over the water utility and we started talking about Eneas Lakes and decommissioning those dams. So what we're going to be asking for in the 2022 budget is funding to do an assessment on what the consequences are to decommissioning those dams. So for the last number of years, we haven't been doing major maintenance out there with the expectation that we're going to be decommissioning them. So what is the cost to continue or to get back into our maintenance cycle and maintain those structures versus decommission them? What are the costs to decommission? And what are the consequences to not having that water set up the way it is now? Will we see an impact to Garnet Lake or not? So those are questions that we don't have answers for right now. And so we're asking for funding for that for next year so we can look into that before we go to council and ask to decommission those.
Councillor Holmes?
For Hunters Hill, the new lift station, does that include the infrastructure for the force main? Or is that something? So I don't even know what infrastructure is required for the force main, but has that been done?
Thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. Yes, on Bentley, that building that's kind of below Hunters Hill there, that's the lift station, and the force main heads towards downtown. So that's all part of it. Yep.
Any other questions on water utility or any of the utilities? Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add in terms of when we report back on, the decommissioning options, there's the consequence, obviously, from the social and recreational, somewhat environmental value of the lakes. The other is to properly calculate our costs, even outside of maintenance, just monitoring. What's happening is the province has tightened up its stringency on the monitoring requirements, and so staff have to attend those structures at all times of the year. And it is some distance away, so we're up there on snowmobiles and in adverse weather conditions, et cetera, a number of times in order to, and actually with increasing frequency, in order to monitor those structures because they have some consequence associated with them. So we will just calculate those ongoing costs to It is true we've avoided some of the maintenance because of our intentions, but we have not and we cannot, because of our authorizations, dial back in any way, shape, or form our ongoing monitoring expenses. So we'll calculate that just so council has a full picture on both sides of it.
Okay, any more questions or comments about any of the utilities presentation? Okay, thanks, Jeremy. We will go on to Chief Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors. Good afternoon. I'd like to present the 2022 Fire Department budget. Accomplishments for this year are 12 individual certifications obtained by members, 196 training sessions year to date, 481 hours. Due to COVID, like everyone's else presentation, we probably cut in half for everything there. Year to date, 284 when the slide was done. We're currently sitting at 291 calls per this year. We've completed our new bush truck and retrofitted the existing bush truck, so they are very similar in design. We're managed to 1999 retrofit it so it looks like a brand new bush truck. I just got word that it's going to be ready. The retrofit will be ready to pick up later this month. We restructuring of our career staff model, and another accomplishment is recruitment and hiring of 2 new firefighter inspector positions, netting 1 for this position this year. Challenges, again, I just commented, just like everybody else, we struggle with COVID-19. Enhanced cleaning protocols and decontamination requirements for apparatus and equipment. We review of internal procedures related to COVID-19, postponement and restructuring of training events. Took a lot of time this year to make smaller practices. Postponement of regular scheduled property inspections. And as of May of 2021 this year, we've started them back up again. Lack of auxiliary members responding to daytime incidents, 7.8 members, which is basically 29.1% of the force. Increased turnout time for first apparatus, 6 minutes and 49 seconds before it gets on scene. Oh, sorry, that's getting out the hall. The first apparatus on scene time is 11 minutes and 51 seconds. Priorities. So I talk about the NFPA 1001. It's a firefighter training standard. And because of COVID, we had our recruitment class of 7. Now it's down to 6. Started in 2019, and it's just taken a bit of time for them to get up to our firefighter standard. We're working, that's our high priority for next year. Also work towards completion of the UBCM grant, working with consultants to develop wildfire prescription on 203 acres of municipal and crown land. And also various fire smart public education projects. And also the development and design of an RFP for replacement of our 1999 water tender, which comes out of our fleet reserve funded capital item. No resources this year. We'll stay with 5 full-time employees. And there's our organizational chart. Currently, our approximately 28 auxiliary members do a great job at our fire station. And then at the lower half, and then our top half is our fire chief. And then we have 2 deputy chiefs. That's our remodeling. One's in charge of operations and training. The other deputy chief's in charge of fire prevention and emergency program. And then our 2 career firefighters are our fire inspectors. We all are operational. We all basically do the same thing. So we're all firefighters in a way. We just have different titles. 2022. So basically, we are status quo for our budget for next year. No significant changes, requests, or increases in comparison to the 2021 budget. And that's it.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Just looking at the 2022 priorities, and I note that we have some grant funding. I'm wondering if, since we're hiring a consultant to make that plan, is that going to cover the entire area that so can we have a conversation about what it might take to make a proper plan and actually what the costs are going to be to make Summerland fire safe so that we don't burn down as well? Good question. Thanks, Councillor. Through the mayor. So we do have the 203 hectares is quite costly to do all in one project. I agree with you. The RFP right now that we have out is basically for 6 hectares, and it's quite expensive at $137,000. So we are working over time. We can definitely have a discussion on trying to figure out where we want to do first and work towards that goal for sure. I'm just wondering if we need to spend more money. I'm wondering if we need to do like 5,000 hectares and what, if we're going to make our community more resilient to those fires that could be coming our way. Good question. We can look into that.
Councillor Van Elfen, and then Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The daytime call out for volunteers is lower than you would like. Are we trying to recruit or entice municipal employees to join the fire department because like they're in town and available?
They don't want to. They're excited about it.
It's just like, is there an active recruiting program that we can go after, local guys that are working here, gals that are working for our district, and, so our call out would be higher during the day and quicker.
Good question. Thank you. Through the mayor, that was one of my interview questions, actually, if I recall, of trying to figure out a way to bring more members to the fire department on a daily during the day. Through Public Works and other parts of our town, it's very difficult sometimes for those members to leave their jobs. They might be in the middle of paving a road or doing other tasks for the town. So I understand your question, but I have tried, yes, but it's a difficult task to have. I do have a couple ideas moving forward, and we'll see if that will work.
I could recommend some counselors, but they're getting way too old.
We don't discriminate against age, so it's all good.
Good answer. That was quick, too. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, with the first apparatus time increasing, from 2008 at 9:25 to 2000 until 11 minutes 51, do we have a response map in regards to the 10-minute response time for development services? Because going to 11 minutes is now shrinking the area in which for that response time. So so we're keeping up with the response time based on BCBC. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Through the mayor, I can't remember the last time we did one. I want to say it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And at that time, the increase of the map really hasn't affected that much of an area. Actually, with the hiring of a new person this year, it actually shrunk a little bit in time, but to equal the 2015 kind of, there's not a whole lot to do, but we could look into redoing one in the near future.
you know what, if it's working, why fix it if it's not broken, right?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Barkwell?
Maybe I didn't, I'm not sure if I understood Councillor Patton's question about 10-minute response time and such. I think, but I was wondering, is it increase in response time partly because we have our growth is maybe a little on the periphery and they got to go a little further, or do we need a faster truck or faster drivers or?
I think it's, thanks for the question through the mayor. It's probably a couple different things. It's probably, or it is, members that have moved away from our downtown core, so take a little longer to get there. And there, yes, for sure, there is a little bit of urban sprawl. So it does impact. I think if you take the average though, through the years and through the calls, that the average of going out of town, like Trout Creek, Deer Ridge, west of town, Garnet Valley, also equates to the ones that are in town. So it kind of averages out the same time. Does that answer the question?
Okay, thanks. Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Holmes?
So just following on that theme, would it stand to reason if you increase density downtown, you get more people living downtown, then that would bring the average down, or it doesn't really work that way?
It's kind of in a way a loaded question for me. It would definitely bring the time down for sure, but then if you bring the density up, it also requires more firefighters to fight those bigger, taller building fires. So yes, it would for sure. If all the calls were downtown, then we would have, but we do have a big area to cover.
Any other questions for a fire chief? Councillor Van Elfen?
Just a comment, Madam Mayor. I want to say thank you to our CAO for, leaving the best department till last, I guess, kind of kept us going for the day here. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. I just want to say I had an unfortunate incident a year ago at my home, and our fire department came out and saved my bacon, I guess, so to speak. But I just want to say how impressed I was and how professional the volunteers were. They didn't laugh at me or anything. And, I had the fire pretty much under control, I do believe, by the time they got there. But I was so impressed with the staff and how professional they were and how caring and, and all the information they gave me after the fact and stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'll pass that along.
All right. I guess over to the CAO for closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to say thank you to Council for your time and consideration of these materials and insightful comments that we have received. So we will continue to refine and mature the budget as we go forward. And as I say, Director of Finance and I will be meeting with department heads, and we'll be coming back with more complete materials in the near future. But this was a great starting point, and we're glad to carry on the conversation.
Okay. Councillor want to bring forward adjournment of the meeting? Councillor Van Elfen and Holmes, all in favor? There we go.
Still going and close?
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. So, yes, apologies, Councillor Van Elfen. So a resolution to go into close, please. Councillor Van Elfen and Holmes, all in favor?